Next. Hey folks, welcome. Good afternoon. On behalf of Beyond Baroque Literary Arts Center, I'd like to welcome you all to the Wanda Coleman Theater and to the Antics UCI MFA reading. Please give it up for our writers today. My name is Jimmy Vega. I'm the Associate Director of Beyond Baroque. I'd like to start by acknowledging Beyond Baroque's presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Tonga peoples. We acknowledge the wrong done to these peoples through settler colonialism, genocidal practices, and the violent disposition of their land. As an arts organization, we are committed to uplifting Indigenous voices, communities, their stories, and cultures. For those who don't know, Beyond Baroque is Los Angeles' oldest literary arts center, located here in Venice, California, founded in 1968. First as an experimental literary magazine before reimagining itself and becoming the literary home we know it as today. We are based out of the original Venice City Hall and help support writers and help cultivate new writing through our extensive program of writing workshops, readings, and performances. We offer a number of workshops online via Zoom, such as our free Monday night fiction workshop facilitated by Raquel Baker, and our historic Wednesday night poetry workshop currently facilitated by Ruja Mohasasi. That workshop has been running continuously since 1969. Similarly, we offer several paid in-person and online intensive workshops throughout the year. I think some of y'all noticed that we had a workshop earlier today. But later this year, we'll have workshop facilitators for the remainder of the year, Louis Vet Resto being one of them, Holiday Mason, Brendan Constantine, to name a few. And aside from our workshops, we offer several readings throughout the year. Next week, we have an abundance of readings and book launches from notable authors such as Lou Matthews, Allison Turner, Douglas Messerly, and Dorianne Locks, to name a few. We'll also host the LA book launch of Lynn Thompson's Blue on Blue Palette next week, which is going to be very special. Lynn is still our kind of official, unofficial Port Laureate of Los Angeles, so please do come back for that and more. We also offer several memberships to Beyond Baroque, starting at $60 for an individual membership. Purchasing a membership allows us to offer free online and in-person programming, as well as you get a discount for our intensive workshops. So really, there is no funding in the arts. So if you become a member, you keep places like this going. So please do consider becoming a member today in the bookstore. Besides that, I want to give a warm welcome to our readers today. We'll bring up Gabe in just a second, but I do want to give a shout out to our staff, Eric Alberg in the booth, Genesis, Yvonne in the bookstore, Quentin Ring. They kind of keep this place running, so thank you. And we're excited. We're excited to host these UCI students. I know at least one of them is venturing out into the world, so we're excited to kind of host them here today and welcome you to the community. So without further ado, welcome Gabe.
Hello, everyone. I will keep this brief. Thank you all for coming. As you know, this is our last reading of the year. It's been a really interesting and exciting time, and it's been a pleasure seeing so many wonderful readings. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Thank you for hosting us. I know it's very, very exciting for us to be here, and I hope this is an auspicious start for all of our future readings as writers. So I just wanted to introduce our readers today. We have the pleasure of hearing from Ivy Olesen, Griffin Fay, Alexandra Geurts, Asusena Lopez, and Alex Williamson. And let's be excited for all of them together. Okay, let's have our first introduction. Thank you so much.
Wow, it's very dark out there. So I am introducing Ivy, and the funny thing about the way Antics has kind of come together is it seems like every time Ivy reads, I introduce them. It's nearly an official role, and it's a great honor, to be honest. So because of that, there will be some references in my introduction to other work. If something feels out of place, just go with it. It's the end of the year and the summer. Okay. Have you ever wondered what it might be like to be a cat at play? A reincarnation of Mother Mary, who is known not only for all that blue light, but also the way she can really fuck. The guy on the other side of the street, walking in huge bounds across the grass, the light from his cell phone roving in a blurry patch across his face. How is he so entranced by his phone, but somehow at one with the landscape, both rushing through it and a metaphor for its running awayness? The way it can't be held. I wonder these things, and the short answer is, I am forced to sleepwalk much of the time. Like Harold, the beguiling, aloof dream of a 23-year-old boyfriend in Ivy's story, Lesbian Breeder Porn, I resort to quoting John Ashbery here. I wonder these things often, and I am forced to sleepwalk. I encounter these fascinations from outside the image. I spectate. I am lucky enough to call Ivy a friend, and as I witness them move through the world, I am consistently inspired by the way they never spectate. They willfully find a way to understand and stubbornly enter into dialogue with the people and phenomena which surround them. In this dialogue with the benign but animalistic parts of daily life and in their story, Lesbian Breeder Porn, Ivy never leans on the short answer. The one who said he would be back once it is over, who eludes us even in our dreams, always returns to Ivy. And like Harold, I quote John Ashbery again there. And they return to Ivy because Ivy is willing to wait long enough to hear them and curious enough to ask the right questions. Lesbian Breeder Porn not only manages to excavate the quiet moments of the psyche which seem ultimately strange, but alchemizes those moments into an exuberant and deeply humorous revelry. And with that, I'll just turn it over to Ivy. Big round of applause, please, for Ivy.
Wow, it's crazy. You really can't see anyone up here. Thank you so much to Beyond Baroque and Alex for that really beautiful introduction. I mean, I might as well lose the glasses. Yeah, so I'm going to read an abridged little section of this short story, and that's about it. It's called Lesbian Breeder Porn, as Alex said. I do think that introduction is possibly better written than the story itself, so I just be prepared. Don't be too excited here. My Gen Z boyfriend is great, except we don't fuck, like ever. We have never fucked, not once. And here I was, hoping he would knock me up. Expectations are the cause of all unhappiness, so I suppose the problem is really me and my simplistic, dirty little shrew brain thinking, boys love boobs, all men can think about is sex. Well, not my Harold. Not my 23-year-old puritanical Harry. Harold, Harry, H, Harrow, what have you, likes John Ashbery poetry, braids my hair lovingly when it's wet, won't just touch my chest, even when I beg him, cooks me elaborate Italian meals, harbors secret libertarian-leaning ideals, has body and hair like an early 80s gym rat, and is my perfect manic pixie dream boy. He's so complex, I often think to myself, and that's why I still keep him around. But tonight, as Harold traces infinity signs on my back in patchouli oil, and I imagine his tongue subbing in for his finger and my pussy taking the place of my scapula, my brain short-circuits with my own horniness, and I'm unable to soothe my nasally inner voice that spews doubt, and suddenly I'm questioning if his complexity or his contradictions are reason enough for our continued enmeshment. Are you gay? I blurt out, because what are you supposed to say when your boyfriend of 2 whole months doesn't fuck you? No, Harold cries, his voice coming close to cracking, as if intentionally reminding me how close he is to puberty, still in the outer orbit of its gravitational pull. I try to make my tone menacing in my reply. I hope you're not just dating me because you thought, since I used to be a dyke, I wouldn't want to sleep with you. I strain my neck to get a glimpse at him to see what his face is doing, which is no small feat because he's on top of me still, mid-massage, straddling my ass with his muscular thighs, dick limp as ever. This time, he appears to be pondering my query in earnest. By which I mean micro-expressions twitch across his face that recalls that one meme of a blonde woman doing mental math. You can almost see him thinking, am I gay? Could I be gay? What if I entertained the hypothetical that I was gay, took that for granted? How would that feel? So thoughtful, my boyfriend. Listen, I say, staring into my mattress, because I'm trying to be reasonable, to demonstrate care and cultural competency in the way I should as the older, more mature person in this relationship. Listen, I read up on it, and I want you to know I get it. Your generation is like not having sex, like statistically less sex than ever. Harold says nothing. I feel acutely aware that my unmade bed rests directly on the ground in this windowless room, that I have no proper furniture at all, just piles of clothes and library books I was meant to return months ago, and that my sublet in this crummy shared apartment in Bushwick is not technically a bedroom at all due to the lack of windows. Is the drywall closing in on us, or is it just me? I want you to feel accepted and supported in this relationship, Harold. Internally, I remind myself that Harold isn't old enough to know how adults are supposed to live, and thus can't judge me for the chaos in which I currently live. Harold is still silent. I peek back at him. He no longer looks ponderous, he looks truly confused, like a little boy who didn't understand that when he let go of the ribbon, his balloon would float away irreparably. Who or what would the balloon be? Me? Is sex then the ribbon? I'm on your team, I tell him. Then I flip over, my tits flopping to either side of my torso so I can squint my eyes meaningfully into his. He grabs his computer and I sigh because she's shutting down again, tuning me out and turning back to the screen, and my awareness of this thought as I watch it pass like a cloud or whatever makes me feel like his actual mother, like I am some geriatric whore, not simply 7 years older than him. 7.5. Let me show you something, he says, flipping the screen. Harold clears his throat. I want you to look. On Harold's laptop, Pornhub is buffering. The internet at the sublet is kind of slow. And when the video he wants loads at last, I see a blonde girl come into focus, playing with an enormous, pale penis, like a kitten plays with a ball of yarn. Or maybe more like the wind plays with one of those inflatable waving men in front of car dealerships. No context, no lead up, no dialogue. The video begins in media res with the girl batting the giant dick around and giggling. Tentatively, she tries a lick. She's licking and licking the hopelessly large cock. She laughs. She tries to place the whole thing in her mouth. Impossible. She gags hopefully. She gags coyly. She gags tearfully. Is this real? I ask him. I'm not sure if I'm asking him about the video itself or his interest in it. Yeah, Harold gulps. I think so. For several minutes, we're both mesmerized by the young blonde. Having wordlessly rearranged ourselves so we're sitting side by side on my bed, crisscross applesauce slumped over the screen, the laptop perched on one of each of our knees, mine knobby, his thick. My small cell of a bedroom melts away, and I feel like I'm there, in the video with Blondie and the big penis, in low-res IMAX 3D mashup. I'm not her or the penis. I'm me, hovering above, unnoticed, watching like a fly on the wall, or like God. I feel powerful. Then the video freezes, begins buffering, and out of the corner of my eye, I notice something twitching in Harold's pants, like a little lizard darting around in the sun, seeking shade and safety from predators. Harold's cock. Could it be? Hardening at last? It looks so big, I say, my eyes back on the screen where the video has resumed. Yeah, the lizard leaps. Is it hot for you when I talk about it? About the big, big dick? About your big dick? Not really. I shut up and get on my hands and knees like I'm doing cat-cow, reach back to pull my panties to the side and offer up my hairy hole to Harold's moderate, unprotected member. He sticks it in only to almost immediately go soft and small inside of me. Our first time. In a show of good sportsmanship, he persists for a few more strokes, looking at me and then looking back at the laptop and then for a few more thrusts just staring at the video. Alas, no cigar. He pulls out and lets my girl goo dry off his penis, still looking at the video, minute 35. And then puts a single digit, this time his pinky, on his dick again. Stroke, stroke. Oh, I cut a bit where there was a bit more about the pinky, so sorry. You don't really fully get it, but it was okay. I try to get my face near his real-life cockerdoodle, hardening before me, to take a little lick of my own, in case this he might allow. But he takes a clammy palm and shoves my face away firmly. The video ends, no cum shot, the giant penis never climaxes, it's just over. Credits roll. Harold goes limp again. We sit in silence on my unmade bed in my messy, unfurnished bedroom. Is it because my breasts look like sunny-side-up eggs? I ask him, after a long pause on the verge of tears, but I don't know why, a fact which only makes me feel more ridiculous. No. Am I too old for you? Definitely not. I'm into you being older. Are you not attracted to me? I'm very attracted to you. I'm more attracted to you than I have been to anyone ever. Harold looks at me super sincerely here, and I do feel a bit better. I smile. So, is it because I used to be gay? No, I like dating lesbians. Have you dated many? A few. Do you think you're drawn to gay people because you're also gay? I really, really don't think I'm gay. Okay, but you know, I'd be like so cool with that if you were. I know. Good. Well, do you think it could be because I said I wanted to take things slow? Perhaps. And then he adds, perhaps we ought to feel with more imagination, which I recognize immediately as a John Ashbery quote because nearly all of Harold's non sequiturs are. But isn't porn sort of the antithesis of imagination? Harold smiles. You think? Perhaps. That's going to be it for today. I'm still up here because I'm going to introduce Blue, just so you know. Okay, cool. So I blew it by saying Blue. I'm here to introduce Griffin Fay, who also goes by Blue, which is how I know him. And is going to read another story about porn. This is like completely coincidental. When I read this story, it really knocked my socks off. Blue has been on the other side of the aisle of this MFA program, which is to say the poetry side. So this is the first fiction that I've ever experienced of Griffin Fay, and you're all really in for a treat. I think this story made me rethink, which I've already been thinking about so much, not only what pornography is, but sex, power, performativity, trust, creativity, and more than anything, what we think we know about the people that we're closest to. What is real, my friends? Yeah, so in this story, everything that you take for granted is upended. And I do think of it as having a little bit of a moral, which is be careful what you wish for. Here's Griffin.
Thank you so much, Ivy. That was a fabulous introduction. And truly, like these are, it's like a fine wine pairing. Like we did not plan this at all. But I think, you know, if I were like teaching a class on like porn, which I don't think I would ever do, the idea of like, you know, is porn the antithesis of imagination would be like such like a thought-provoking question to pose before this story. Oh, you don't think so, Ivy? Okay.
Your story proves no.
Well, no, that's what I was going to say. There's like some very real tension between these two stories. This is titled Mr. Arciniega's Silver Lake Porno Palace. It was Corey's idea to open the relationship. He was 29, frivolous, and he still wanted to be ravaged by strangers on the internet. He played intramural water polo in college, and he thought that meant something. The men he hooked up with thought it meant something too. They would run their hands over his chest, and their eyes would widen, transfixed by the tractor beam of his body. It was the same look his boyfriend gave him when Corey said he wanted to be non-monogamous. Whatever you want, Miles stammered, all glasses and eyebrows. Corey thought it would always be like that. He would go to the bathhouse or the park or the trough urinals at leather bars and come home to find Miles industriously repairing one of his video cameras, a pile of film reels and camera guts strewn across the table. From time to time, Corey would ask if he had hooked up with anyone else, and Miles would blush, shrinking down into his t-shirt like a collapsible folding chair. No, he'd admit, I only like being with you. Corey knew that Miles was all his late bloomer, his sexy sleeper cell, his devoted, thoughtful boyfriend, utterly terrified of the world outside their apartment. The only form of homosexual perversion that Miles seemed to enjoy was a video store on Sunset Boulevard that specialized in vintage pornography. He would pull an old VHS tape off the shelf, and the proprietor, an elderly pigeon-toed homosexual with uneven spurts of silver hair fountaining out of his skull, would set up a projector in a small 10-person theater, turn out the lights, and leave him alone with the film, a bag of stale M&Ms, and a bottle of lotion. The proprietor's name was Mr. Arciniega, and his establishment was called the Silver Lake Porno Palace. Miles was always asking Corey to go with him, but truthfully, Corey found the whole thing kind of vulgar. He didn't like the men who loitered around the aisles, the way they fumbled each other in the dark theater. The entire thing lacked organization. There was no sexual choreography to speak of. There was nobody to dazzle, nobody to appreciate, except as another warm body in the dark. Sometimes, if Miles was late coming home, Corey would walk to the porno palace and find him and Mr. Arciniega debating the various shots and angles of a particular sex scene. They watched vintage pornos like relics. They spoke like mad scientists trying to build a time machine back to the 1970s, to a paradise lost. They believed that the internet had destroyed the porn industry, left it a barren wasteland of amateurism and equal opportunity. Corey himself was never very interested in porn. He found it posy, boring, a sad simulacrum of human touch. One day, Miles burst into the apartment and began rummaging through the closet, pulling out cameras, tripods, film reels, and spreading them out on the bed. "What's up?" Corey asked him, stepping out of the shower. He let his towel drop to the floor, but Miles didn't even look up. "Someone's died," Miles breathed, gathering up the film equipment from the bed and cradling it in his arms. "We're making a movie." The dead man was a big costume designer in Hollywood. There were 2 Academy Awards in his living room display case, and his house was a monument to the period drama. It was a beautiful 2-story home with double French doors and climbing ivy and statues of naked boys peeing down into fountains and koi ponds. It looked like something straight out of the 1800s, and Mr. Arciniega was letting Miles use it as a film set before the dead man's body was found. "How did you know this guy?" Corey asked as Miles and Mr. Arciniega fumbled with the key to the front door. "A lady never tells," Mr. Arciniega giggled, brandishing the correct key and turning the doorknob. Walking into the house, it was like the French Revolution had never happened. There were huge tapestries mounted on the walls, children on crusade, castles under siege, hounds and horsemen on unicorn hunts. There was a harpsichord in the living room, gilt mirrors, a Louis XV fainting couch. Even the shower curtain in the bathroom was covered in a heavy fleur-de-lis print. The dead man was still there, laid out peacefully on a hospice cot that had been set up next to his grand but utterly impractical canopy bed. "Jesus," Corey breathed as Mr. Arciniega lovingly pulled a sheet over the man's body. It was the first time he'd ever seen a corpse. Miles set to work at once, dragging the fainting couch into the center of the living room and building a large fire. Mr. Arciniega was in charge of the talent, and in a few hours he had somehow peopled the living room with 5 guys stripped down to nothing but their underwear. They huddled around the fireplace, draped in the dead man's bathrobes, waiting for Mr. Arciniega to begin costuming them. He came downstairs carrying a gold brocade doublet and a pair of matching breeches. He motioned for the tallest guy to strip naked and proceeded to dress him in the suit, pulling the ensemble together with an outrageous feathered hat and a sword in a long, skinny sheath. "Is that thing real?" Corey asked. "The sword or the ostrich plumes?" Mr. Arciniega laughed, winking at him and moving on to the next guy. When they were all dressed, Miles motioned for the man in the brocade suit to lay down on the fainting couch and instructed him to pretend to be asleep. The man splayed out, his legs kicked up over the side of the couch, his arm hanging down to the floor. "Now get hard," Miles instructed. The man reached down into the waistband of his breeches, but Miles stopped him. "No," he said. "Do it with your mind." The man opened his eyes and stared at Miles. "What?" he asked. "Your mind," Miles said. "It's all happening in your mind." The man looked at Corey and Mr. Arciniega for help, but Mr. Arciniega just nodded with a sage expression. "You can do it," Miles urged. The man closed his eyes and frowned in concentration. "You're sleeping," Miles corrected. "Peacefully." The man relaxed his expression, but only fractionally. It took nearly 10 minutes of unbroken concentration. Corey had stopped paying attention by the time it happened. When he looked up, the man's trousers were pitched like a tent, a gold brocade canopy for some miniature dauphin to sleep in. "Good," Miles said, working the camera at all kinds of odd angles and motioning for another man to go on set. "What's my line again?" the man whispered, wearing nothing but a long white nightgown. "Monsieur," Miles said, "the rebels are at the gates of the city." The rest of the night was madness. Miles filmed in nearly every room of the house, recreating through the sheer force of his imagination the kitchens, bedrooms, and ballrooms of Marie Antoinette's Versailles. The men worked in shifts, sleeping, showering, douching, and fluffing each other when they weren't on camera. Mr. Arciniega facilitated over 20 costume changes, dressing the men like aristocrats and revolutionaries in ruffed collars and powdered wigs. When dawn came around, Mr. Arciniega made a run to Dunkin' Donuts while Miles kept filming a garden scene in which the two youngest boys, dressed in nothing but leather aprons, slaughtered a chicken and proceeded to bathe the blood off each other in a fountain. The plot, Corey began to realize, was complicated. The story Miles was trying to tell seemed to center around a marquis attempting to flee Versailles on the eve of the French Revolution. Mr. Arciniega explained the concept to the men as the last night on earth for the Ancien Regime, and they nodded, shifting uncomfortably in their corsets and ruffles and hoop skirts. The air of death in the house was palpable. The men touched each other like they knew there was a dead body in the bedroom upstairs. And perhaps they did. And that is all. Thank you. Okay. Well, it is now my tremendous honor to introduce Allie Geurts, who is a very dear friend who I have workshopped with throughout this entire year. And I am, just so in awe of Allie's talent and her vision, and particularly of her courage on the page. I feel like I've learned so much from her and grown a lot in workshop. And it's just such a thrill to be able to introduce her today. Allie Geurts is a poet who hails from LA County. She has, by her own admission, watched much of her precious time on this earth dwindle away while riding public transit. This reality is heavily reflected in Allie's syntax. Her sentences have been touched by eternity, much like the bus routes and metro lines of Los Angeles. They reach out to the reader, sustaining the line and elongating the poem. Allie's poems are surreal explorations of suburbia, spirituality, the body, and death. Her attention to form keeps them fresh and sharp. In this reading, we have a concrete poem in the shape of an inverted cross, a list poem, and even an abecedarian. Allie's poems use mortality and even gore to underline the layers of context that make up a body or a suburban space. Even a corpse will retain its history, she writes. Her poems feel like 21st century versions of Baroque vanitas paintings, careful accumulations of urbanized detail whose beauty almost distracts you from the message of memento mori. The writer Octavia Butler once said that Los Angeles is so spread out that almost any bus ride will be a long one. The ride, Butler found, was not wasted. In fact, it proved the perfect opportunity for writing. While Allie may have spent countless hours shuttling from one side of LA County to the other, her poems are living proof that the time was well spent. Please join me in welcoming Allie Geurts to the stage.
Hi. Thank you, Griffin. That was really nice. I feel bad I'm not reading any poems about trains. I was going to and I took it out. So now I feel like I should have done that. So that, But I was gonna read 3, but I think I'm gonna read 4. I think I'm gonna eat up and waste people's time today. Okay, so I guess I'm gonna start with the one that might be kind of controversial first. If people in this room are familiar with that one Green Day song, Jesus of Suburbia, I hope you hold that in your mind. You know the song, because that's kind of what I'm going for with this piece. That's called Anti-Revelations, and it was me trying to write about religion, and it's kind of problematic. Please don't get mad at me. I love God and football. Please don't throw eggs at me. Thank you. Okay. It's called Anti-Revelations. We were never promised a garden, paradise a plot lined with lilies sanitized, scrubbed clean of want, the roses crimsoning each and every parable, trickling down the teeth of their leaves, a mistranslation of the end as Eden, framed decay in almost gold. But look around you. It is black cross hatches of crackling power lines that hold up the Empyrean, preventing it from tumbling onto us when the weight of the dead proves to be too much. Their messages scrawled beneath the freeway bridges, graffiti a testament of their intentions. Even the sidewalks crack from the pressure, stitched shut by wilting dandelions, their babbling, xanthic, frantic, quote, breaking, human detritus threatens to flood the neighborhood, and thus he locks all his doors, shuts all his windows, draws all his blinds. He reclines in his beatific sofa, sips from his piping hot cup of man, turns up the TV a little louder. Like clockwork, he tunes into the static sermon to drown out the benthic sound of his steadfast disappointment. Next up, the weather. The newscast is a clear spring sky. Earth is nothing more than an orphanage. There is no father, let alone any Holy Ghosts. Any I do see are merely my grief resurrected. I'd sooner gouge out my eyes than fall for such trickery. Even sooner I'd crucify this heretic's life of mine than take it lying down. Okay, thank you. Oh, we're snapping because it's poems. Okay, I forgot that was the thing we did. I changed the order, so I'm jumping to a different piece. Do I want to give context to this? I kind of don't know if I want to give context. I kind of want to just sit in the room with no context. Yeah, I'm not gonna give context. You guys are gonna have to figure it out. But it's based off a scene of something. So this poem is also new, so it hasn't been workshopped, so it might kind of be rough, but that's okay. It's called I Didn't Mean for You to See Me. I didn't mean for you to see me like this, mid-bite and hunched over prey, freshly killed in the hallway, hunger dripping viscid down my chin, its crimson varnishing this unveiling of appetite, a bite taken out of crisp flesh. In this moment, my femininity, a taxidermy of being, falters. I got used to puppeteering a facade, my real body a wriggling, disgusting thing I grew accustomed to, its audacity blooming into an eagerness to kill. When the bloodlust became too much, I gutted what was left of my girlhood, garnished the scraps with ambrosial apple blossoms. Nobody could sniff me out, nor tell what I was hiding, what was beating itself to a bloody pulp in the ivory cage of my ribs. I thought I had manipulated the remains enough that even your vision, nearsighted at best, would never catch a glimpse. That's why I didn't expect you to kneel down beside me, your figure magnificent, etched in ochre gold from the setting sun spilling in from the front door propped open behind you. You take my hand, skin sticky from want, into yours. I watch you scrutinize the half-chewed morsel in my palm. The seconds that pass by us shudder. A moment close to choking, tension, a difficult bone to swallow, but then you turn your gaze upon me, human and tender around the edges, and ask with a voice so mundane, "Hey, can I try some of that?" And how could I refuse such a request? Okay. Okay. I wasn't going to do the grocery store poem, but now I feel bad that Griffin said it was his favorite, so I feel like I should read it anyways. Which is funny, because I think the last time I did a reading here 2 years ago with UCLA, and I read an older version of this poem, so I feel like I should read it. That would be thematically correct. Okay, thank you, Jaime, I appreciate it. So this one's just my grocery store poem, that's it. So it's a bit different than the last time I read it, though. You were in the checkout line at the grocery store, aging bulbs gnashing their teeth in static electricity overhead. In your shopping cart are the following items. 1. A box of wheat cereal taken from the promised land of milk and honey. When you lifted the box from the highest shelf, it, to your surprise, weighed absolutely nothing. 2. A pint of milk beaten and bruised. On the side, there is contact information for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Inner Children. Alongside this is a black and white photo of you when you were in elementary school. 3. A dozen eggs, unfertilized and unwanted. It was voted Product of the Year the same year that you were born. It was never nominated again after that. 4. A carton of flesh-squeezed human juice, parentheses, pulp-free, close parentheses. 5. A loaf of Scarborough bread baked with fair amounts of parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. It expired 3 years ago. The greenish mold spores of heartbreak cover most of the slices. 6. A bottle of pure virgin olive oil. It is on sale because it was already open. 7. A box of funeral flower pancake mix paired with extra onions in case you cannot cry during the service. 8. A 9-ounce bag of ground coffin dust, dark roast. The bag reads in colorful typeface, quote, "The best way to start your mornings is to not start them at all," end quote. 9. A package of frozen scallop scalps, a flaky gratin with 4 layers of epidermis hacked from somebody's shriveled up head. 10. A post-traumatic salad kit containing the necessary ingredients for a traumatized brain, including but not limited to butchered brainstems, a pickled prefrontal cortex, sliced amygdala, overactive, and a damaged hippocampus with, cortisol and a norepinephrine vinaigrette. 11. A jar of whole organic tender hearts suspended in a glimmering vermilion liquid. Proudly, the label declares to have just the imperfect ones. 12. A bag of red flesh navels leaking some undetermined fluid onto the plastic boughs of your shopping cart. They lack umbilical cords because after birth you are no longer connected to your mother. 13. A bag of 10 petite carrot-like fingers of many colors with protruding phalanx bones. Some are a dark purple or bluish hue, some gone bright white, bloodless. When you insert your card to pay, it is immediately declined. Not quite dead yet. Try again next time. The payment terminal reads. That's okay, you think. You'll be back tomorrow. That's it. Okay, I'm gonna do one more, and then I'm gonna sit down. Well, I have to introduce someone, and then I'll sit down. So this is the abecedarian that Griffin mentioned, so each line starts with a different letter of the alphabet, except I'm reading the X'd out as crossed out. Alex told me that was cheating. I'm gonna do it anyways, because I think X'd out sounds really corny, so I'm gonna say crossed out instead. I'm sorry, don't hold that against me. I guess small content warning, because this is a poem that is reminiscing on self-injury and self-harm, so if that makes you uncomfortable, you can step outside for a bit, that's fine. And I'm just gonna read it. It's called My Peace of Mind Can't Stay Inside the Lines. A self-affliction gave me not salvation, but syntax, a sentence I wholly committed myself to. The act of saying felt dangerous, so I poured myself over the then empty pages available to me, every fresh sheet of paper-thin skin awash with gibberish. I used to gaze at these hieroglyphics nightly, trace their scar tissue prophecy, imagined it foretelling my death. An end juxtaposed with my survival of the narrative. All that is left is printed across my forearm, its margins annotated in the most permanent of ink. Yet, even after this, I never fully escaped the compulsion to pen out tragedies, my weapon of preference merely exchanged for something not quite as deadly, but twice as cutting, resulting in an infinity of sequels and spin-offs. As long as I am writing, my tale will continue, and likewise, until my body rots, every last verse of the original will remain visible. Even a corpse will retain its history, a legacy whose intent can never be crossed out or eradicated. Funny how life never fully yields to decay. Funnier how I keep waking up zoetic as if being revived from the grave. Thank you. I'm introducing Asusena. Are we going on break? Or am I just going right to it? I'm gesturing this question to Gabe and Jacob. Do I? Keep going? Okay, cool. I have to look it up on my phone because I forgot to print it. Sorry. So I'm going to introduce Asusena. It's now my pleasure to introduce Asusena Lopez, who is actually graduating this summer. So this is her last time reading for Antics. She has roots strongly planted here in Los Angeles, having been raised in South Central and is now living in Boyle Heights with her 3 kitty cats. She attended Los Angeles City College and Cal State Northridge, studying creative writing and music education. In regards to her poetry, well, let me just say this. I like to think of poems as containers for things, meaning they keep stuff and things from spilling out onto the texture of the real world. Asusena's poems feel like this. Each poem of hers is a container of memory, a snapshot of overlapping flickers of images and moments tied together by a candid narrative voice that is both as musical as it is raw. It simultaneously stitches its story together with a meticulously crafted melody, yet it does not flinch away from the pointed details of decay, where they intersect in remembrance and in recreation, where they flourish in reality and in the imagined. Moreover, the worlds in Asusena's poems are vividly human, down to their very landscapes. Salty shorelines can be scarred as if it were skin. Sunsets are smudged by something akin to human hands. The moon is in pieces, the fragments of a face. Suffice to say that hearing her work should be a vividly transporting experience. Please join me in welcoming Asusena.
That was so beautiful. I don't know what you mean by. Allie messaged me saying that she thought her introduction was cringy, and I don't know what you mean by that at all. Okay, I have a timer here. Okay, so this first poem called Photo Dump made me think of this snippet from TikTok from this song, Oh Superman by Laurie Anderson, and it was used a lot in like a little snippet of it in TikTok videos where people play it and they're like looking through old pictures of dead relatives, and the lyric that repeats is, "You don't know me, but I know you." And it made me think about how photographs outlive us. And this poem contrasts photos that people would take on analog cameras versus the ones we take on our phones, which are sometimes they're just of random things. Like I have one from like a drunken night out with that I found like a cockroach next to an empty Patron bottle, and it looked like I'd gotten drunk off that. So, okay, photo dump. Scanning the aisles of books in a thrift store, a scrapbook seizes my attention. I flip through a life material in my hands. My index brushes the perforated edges of concert ticket stubs, brittle pressed plants, road trips outlined in maps, and photographs of people without filters, wearing graduation caps, wedding gowns, all black. Tucked away in my desk drawer is a hard drive of curating gigabytes of dancing blurs, desert roads still yet moving with life resisting capture like frozen tides, cityscapes reflecting sky, blue, blush, soot, and violet, a sun swollen like a tick, ruins with their ghosts cast in stone, chipped yet dignified. Out of focus fireworks, rewound and looped bursts, the moon, a fixed pupil, a smile hooked in imperfect pixels, time-lapse car rides, tunnels, bridges, lanes, collisions, sliding and merging like rain on tempered glass, recordings of untuned happy birthdays, squeezed eyelids and pursed lips, flames sighing vapor, flashes of strobe lights, hands, fists, and stage dives, confetti falling in slow motion like first snow, bird's eye views of banana splits, eggs benedicts, grenadine drinks with gradients like sunsets swirled by pinky fingers. Close-ups of textures, cat paws, snake scales, bark like impasto, frames of face fuzz, eye specks, freckle constellations, a montage of selfies in bathroom mirrors, lake reflections and security monitors, Halloween face paint before and after, bloody noses, hair dye mishaps, fresh tattoos. In the scrapbook photographs, everyone is posing, looking straight at me, a stranger flipping through their memories that will likely disintegrate in a dump. Heirlooms. You pretend to fall asleep while driving so I can steer. As I take the wheel, I re-enter my body, half naked, with drool on the horn, a splinter in my head. The smell of cheap beer and ash isn't coming from you. It's my own sweat. You are not alive, and I am no longer a child. I start my car and drive away, refusing to check my rear view mirror as I switch lanes, for fear I'll see you in the reflection. These eyes are my own, not yours. Who I resemble, I must not become. I know better than to drink alone, to pour a nightcap at the end of a long day, because by morning, one glass will morph into an empty bottle. I know better than to take a drag of a cigarette, because one will multiply into a carton cramped into my small mouth. Pumping gas at number 7, I don't turn my head towards the neon numbers to check how high the jackpot for the Mega Million is, because if I do, I'll shrink back to 3.5 feet tall, peeking through a crack in the door, watching you scratch a lottery ticket with your lucky penny pinched between thumb and index, your calves the size of my wrists dangling off the gatch bed. All right. And since Allie read a poem about a deadbeat God, I have one about God and the devil that I've added. Eye spots. I rush into a see you tomorrow to end the call. My mother forewarns, si Dios quiere. I know for the sake of her blood pressure not to call God fickle. I feign faith by repeating the 4-word prayer. The devil I prefer because he's always willing. There's a contract signed in blood, an equal exchange and no delay in transaction, whereas God forwards my prayers to voicemail. The devil understands my thirsts. He keeps watch between supermarket aisles as I pocket bottles of liquor, while God tracks my movements through security monitors. When I am gummed to bed days at a time, the devil and I watch reality dating shows. Above us, God hovers inside the lighting fixture. Through the eyes of a woman in a wedding dress pictured on the nightstand behind my lover's back, God's non-consensual glare follows me, and I still feel it even after I face the frame down. At a bridal shop, where I model the same dress she wore, the devil lifts a flute of complimentary champagne and cheers. It looks better on you. My mother advised I consider them a Mobius strip. All I see is differences. He dresses in boa stilettos and snakeskin, while God is stuffed in a forewarned sack. My confessions are judgments to one, chisme to the other. Both respond, I can't believe you did that. Thank you. This next one is about a recent trip that I took to Death Valley in August of last year, and this year there was a bunch of atmospheric rivers that refilled Lake Manly and Badwater Basin in Death Valley, the desert, and I wanted to go see that with my friends, and on Instagram I saw a bunch of tourists kayaking, but there was an alert in the National Park Service updating people that the footsteps and the boat lines that would drag on the salt bed would remain there for years if people went too deep into the lake because it had evaporated mostly. So this is about that. Badwater Basin. Sunlight scattered through the overcast sky silvers the lake, a mirror reflecting snow-capped mountains. From the highway, black breakwaters protruding from the cellophane surface appear the size of toothpicks. Nearing the pier, the mirage dissipates. The breakwaters sharpen into people lumbering in pockmarks of brackish rainwater. While glaciers encased most of the world, this lake dressed Death Valley in blue sequins, until the Holocene heat evaporated its gown. This year, an atmospheric river refilled the basin, deep enough to kayak. But soon, the desert will exhale its last puddles. The salt will crystallize into a pattern of honeycomb scabs, and the name traced by a tourist who is desperate for permanence will scar the shore until the next flood washes the letters away. And I will close out with this one in the voice of Sin. Bigger than sin, I am temptation under moonlight, tumbling out of waves and clinging to your collar. I am the ache in your knees as you kneel on the pew, breath that makes the cross behind the screen question its own salvation. Your secrets are my flint, crisp as the crackle of a whip. I am fiberglass, you can't burn me at the stake, but I flare to reveal gold in my palms. I am the shattered mirror warping your reflection, the shimmer perspiring down a cold glass, grease dripping down your chin. I am the ghost hanging at your neck, hot ruby seeping into your throat. When your tongue is webbed, I am the lilt dancing out microphones, the undulating hum in your ears, the green side eye grating your skull is me, dull, ceaseless. Okay, so next up, I'm going to be introducing Alex's work, and I will have to give credit to Andie Klarin for writing this introduction. Andie couldn't make it today, but I'm reading their introduction for them. I am not the one who gets to tell you what good art does or tries to do, but I can tell you this. Alex's work follows the rich and wonderful tradition of art that transforms. Shapes, bodies, ideas, slants, and circumstances all slip in and out of becoming each other, while we as an audience are permitted to explore a world where the truth has been positioned to be more beautiful and strange. We are guided by Alex's expert hand through it, what it might do to us. Alex's work insists that light, time, love, and life are more complicated than they appear at first glance, and everything Alex places in their work becomes more delicate the longer their voice compels us to the surface. We as readers and listeners are asked to use a new kind of understanding with the time, the sky, and the space and heat beyond what we can see of it. Alex's work uses metaphor to measure our world against itself and to draw out its most singular, unique features. It shows us a version of life that is defined by unity, where everything becomes everything else. We as readers watch this becoming happen slowly over the course of many fragments, which each seem to act as a new frame or perspective. Alex has completed each moment to the point that they take on the quality of a visual image in the mind. Every object is placed just so within the frame and animated by a different, unexpected, sensual detail. For me, the experience of Alex's work is one of expansion. I find myself seeing with a different sense than I was before, accepting truths that I would have ignored without their compellingly playful and open approach to exploration of life. Their work expands understanding in a way that transforms the shape of my world to be something a bit more open to beauty. Alex draws up so much symmetry between their subjects in a way that creates awe in me. Their work seems to say, this is a kind of love, to look at the world until you can see the self. In a moment here, when Alex begins to read, I invite you to let your understanding be swallowed by the completeness of the world they have created and to observe what stunning new place you land inside it. Okay, let's give a round of applause to Alex.
Wow, that was terribly beautiful and a lot to live up to. I think just some context for the world that Andy references. These are all poems based on a country music song called Delta Dawn, where a woman named Delta Dawn is waiting for someone to take her to the sky, that someone being an ex-lover. And, you know, in my new world, Delta and Dawn are kind of two separate entities, one being more representative of something like space and one kind of functioning as time. But the poems will tell you that as well. Okay. In an early experiment, time filmed the inside of space, and it sounded not unlike a summer haze. The words in the windowsill ran 2 stories into the grass below, and the collected film reads as a looping vasculature. To reperform, make a durational copy of any river. This next piece is excerpted from a longer work called Performance for the Sky. It's the only piece that features the original Delta Dawn and this kind of set of poems that I've brought in today. In this text, Delta Dawn is found sitting there in her vehicle brightly with a fragment of highlighter blue sky in her suitcase. She calls a tow truck and is known to tell her friends, "I've just always liked the sky," or "I wanted to know how the sky smelled. I might have stayed, but it wasn't all that much." On days where she is feeling particularly theoretical, she sits at home and stares at the blocks of sky on her desk. She's working on the sky as a new form of measurement. How many sky bricks, for instance, could one pile into the earth? In sky cubes, how long had she been waiting? Alternatively, in this text, where Delta Dawn is not found in her vehicle, Delta has wandered off as something like space and Dawn as something like time. They either A, meet once, B, fuck in a church parking lot, or C, make a lot of home movies together. Dawn waits on the dark side of the road. Rivulets, remainders of Delta run, streak alongside, smudgy lilac on tape over and over. Dawn is all time, and Delta is all space. Thank you. This one is called The Seventh Biggest Star Reflected in the Water of a Glass and Drink It. And it is in the voice of Delta. I'm still figuring out these characters. But one thing to know about them is they like to make stuff. And they like to write stuff. I write what I know. Sue me. Okay. I correct an artist I used to know. He thinks an old video piece of mine is about God. In the video, a butterfly beats itself into powder on the bed sheets. I tell him it is about the way I always knew you, the way your gestures made me stop wanting to be before myself. I've heard he was so obsessed with light, he became light. You and I held that light mirrored in a field and grew toward it. A moth is drowning in my water glass. The home holds reflections of the sky, and trees are a staircase to heaven, the artist used to say. This moth has never once used the stairs to get to heaven, I tell you, if you were here. In the new work, you unseal the powdered brown wings from rippled water. The moth lurches gummy and drunk across your fingertips. And there's a footnote. The title is a quotation of a piece by Mieko Shiomi called Star Piece. And the butterfly powder is a reference to the waves in which one boy falls in love with another boy for the way he flicks his hand to the back of his neck. The other boys also try to perform this gesture but fail. Moments later, a priest will mince butterflies to powder with his words. The boy makes a note of the butterfly powder to use in his writing, but not the gesture. Okay. This is a longer sequence, just heads up, and it's called Out of a Broken Rib Sprouts an Afternoon. 1. Delta carries dawn, enters, the truth is light, and the seams between leaves of her fingers glinted, carrying the sky downward silver, they will later hold, bleeding, fogged, naked, mourning to the floor, reflected in the window panes, and she is tossed into, becomes a field, a hand departing, returns with a gaze, down the spine, green, marking it, with bladed clicks, part of this hour. 2. A feathered type of reaching down sequential bones is a function of X, or a falling into. There is space, after all, between the notches of the spine and between the body and its want. Light bleeds in underneath the curtain and either binds time to the floorboards leaking, etc., or allows time to run off. Note the running off like an elbow made of leaves and the arm flung. 3. A drooping power line against any pink sky that wandered west through Chicago as curved footfall into summer grass skimming like eyelashes to the earth. Dawn's eyes back then struck delta as similar to insect wings. They severed out sections of dry sky. She knew time and its tendency to fall honey-boned out of ether blue. Together in the convertible, a mouth on the hours was only a short forgetting of air, and dawn lingered. 4. When dawn wakes, Delta asks, do you hear the green blurring into the trees outside? This morning contains another in which I wake up, mouth open to the passing hour. Okay, in long sequence, beginning of a poem called Hot Tub Conversation, or Space and Time in a Hot Tub. I am taking feedback on that one. Delta, and I'll just read as both voices in this. In the dream, I always have my mother's body. The doctor asks, what seems to be the problem today? I say, every time I use the restroom, a little rain comes out. It seems I am always a little full of rain. Animals disguise themselves as other animals to avoid the same fate, a flooding of the folds of their bodies. Dawn. That reminds me of the photographer who held a fish to her mouth to taste what it's like to be silver. Delta. That's my favorite thing about you. Your words, they are silver. Must be the snaggletooth. Dawn. And your mother? Mostly recovered. She only keeps rain in her pockets now, often forgets it there. Dawn, like the window panes? Delta, yes, like the window panes. Delta, do you ever wonder in the middle of the day if the dream has ended? Mine soak back through my consciousness while I eat my lunch, and I'm not sure if I am asleep or awake. Dawn, you're awake, I think. Delta, today a dove emptied out its soft throat above me. I heard one mauve cloud descend, foliage veins anchor into the corner of my window while I do not sleep. And my heartbeat sounds like it's dripping into the pillowcase. Dawn, I've seen that before. You snore, and each beat is a puff stain. Delta and Dawn. And this morning, my apple tasted like daylight. Thank you. Last poem, it's called Love Tool. There's what's it called? Epigraph to this one. Quoting Freud. I'm not seriously quoting Freud, you know, like he started a tradition that's kind of fun to play around with. But mostly I really wanted to write a poem called Love Tool, so I used Freud. Okay. That epigraph reads, with every tool, man is perfecting his own organs, whether motor or sensory, or removing the limits to his functioning. Motor power places gigantic forces at his disposal, which, like the muscles, he can employ in any direction. If you let the light pour long enough, it will remain still, a field not flowing, but slanted. Anything blossomed, toppled over, and scattering. The hands and their similar substance were something to behold. Delta had hands that rippled and fingernails like hallucinations. She treasured these hallucinations, which ran floral to the ground as if blood from between the neck and severed head of St. Catherine in that one painting. Catherine at some point found herself married to Christ after dreaming it. With the same willingness, Delta sat cross-legged in a chair near the kitchen window, and Dawn caught her fingernails on tape. You're always waiting, green and oddly day-like. Better to rename a tangled footfall in the grass around 5 p.m. Slowly, intermittent winds were tossed and chewed at consciousness over the span of a moth. Dust scattered accordingly inside Delta, and the filmic eye divided out the pieces, a light and limb looping. How long is it? It is a lacy beginning. And I believe that's all for the evening. Thank you.
Wow, what a fantastic reading for our last reading. I really can't see any of you. That is true. I was like, yeah, there we go. Thank you. What a fantastic reading. Thank you all for coming. Let's give a big round of applause to our readers today. What a fantastic job. And thank you to Jimmy and Beyond Baroque and everybody that helped us organize this. Thank you so much. Yeah. One last thing. I was told that this was live streamed, right? And so it's on the YouTube. It'll be on the YouTube channel of the whole reading if anybody wants to go back and rewatch and things like that. All righty. Thank you so much for a wonderful year. Thank you.